Привет всем, it's Bear, I'm back. It's been a while, yes I know guys. Anyways, if you really want to know the reasons, join me on Patreon, I'll tell you what happened. But that's not what this video is about. It's about this excellent kit from MAGIC Factory, the M2A2 ODS-SA in 35th scale. And if you see some of the thumbnail, I'm not building it as per the box art, as I really wanted to build one of these for a long time in US Army markings. Simple as. Anyways, what I'm going to try and do to show you in this video is how you can build the model up in subsections and aid yourself in painting the vehicle accurately. In fact, the construction is relatively straightforward. There's only a few things to look out for. In terms of suspension, the swing arms here, they have location tab points that keep them aligned. Pay attention to the instructions. Be careful, do not get confused in the markings. This is how it should be laid out. 3 of them supported by those dampening cylinders at the back, and then one at the front. Once you've aligned all those pieces, use a straight edge, of course, go in with your liquid glue, and you can finally cement them into place. And then we attach what are the return idlers. This vehicle, as you'll see, the build it has quite a few parts. Why is that? Well, the Bradley, many of you will think of it as an aluminum or aluminium vehicle. Well, these M2A3s, they are more like laminated. They have loads of steel armor plate that is applique armor placed on the original aluminium chassis of the vehicle. And that's why there's lots of parts to add. So when you see this thing, you see join the hull together, you can see that the actual hull is pretty bare looking because you need to build up all these applique panels. And I think this is the best way to approach it, to give it that realistic look. So a lot of this build is, as I'm showing here, basically adding on all these plates that make up the armor of the Bradley. But this is a great way to give detail to the kit. I'm glad that we approach it this way, and it certainly does create a realistic build. Point to note, there is no real interior whatsoever for the vehicle. There were some parts that allowed some detail for the rear ramp that I'm showing you there, but those parts, well, if you open up, you're just looking inside an empty shell. If you haven't seen my review video, check out my review video, part 1 in this video series, and I do discuss some options here. Now I'm going to show you how to build the tracks. This is the main sort of modification you need to make in order to do this. This is what I came up with to build the tracks link and length style. So there you go. I built up the lower run, and that's already formed up, set in place. Now the top run is one single piece, but what I did was trimmed out about 2 or 3 centimeters from that top run and glued them on separately this side, and you'll see later on why I do that. The next part, of course, is construction of the turret. And once again, this is many applique armor panels that glued into position. Should I say anything about the fit? Yeah, the fit's great. There's actually no real problems whatsoever. I didn't encounter anything. Also, just pay attention to some of these parts. You can see that they actually have some texture on them. I'll explain a little bit about that later on. This is, of course, the tow launcher. This is just getting dry fitted at this stage. And here we are. These are the 3D printed resin parts that are unique to this version to make this M2A2 ODS-SA. They could have made them in plastic because there's really not too much detail in them, bar this part, which is the rear basket. This rear basket is absolutely excellent. It's got a lot of internal detail. Of course, in order to attach this on the plastic, you need to use your super glue. You can see the fit is perfect. You can see how a plastic part would have easily been able to accomplish this, but that's what MAGIC Factory did. and I can just tell you that fitting them is really easy. You can see that the turret basket even has a keyed connection point, and of course there's some photo etch to add. Not too much for this kit. Be careful, this is the driver's viewer. Some of them will have this protective wire mesh on, and also the commander's independent viewer will have a protective wire grid on top, but not all vehicles do, so check your references. This is a little bit daunting. These are all the tie down straps made in photo etch. However, as I pointed out in the review, they don't need to be separated from the photo etch fret. They're all independent. I used a pair of pliers in order to bend them to position, and then it's just a case of simply gluing them into place. Now, again, I do mention in the review, check your references. There's many different configurations of attaching these tie-down loops onto vehicles, so you can see many different varieties. In some cases, they'll be in different configurations. Also, the instructions do not point out where these are also attached, typically on the hull. So again, check that on the hull, and also in particular on the front plate, the front glasses plate. I added some lead wire here. This is just detail parts. This part, do not forget to add it. It is the very last part of the instructions. I've seen builds where people have not added this. It is a part of armour, and also is the anti-fouling mechanism for the driver's hatch. There we go. These are basically the modules that you're going to have now. Also, I have a few accessories to add, and there you can see the tracks with that gap in. So let's go ahead and prime the vehicle. I'm using my favourite primer, Mr. Surfacer. Going for brown this time. Why brown? Why black? Why brown? Why black? Anyways, we tend to use a dark colour. I'm using brown here. Brown is quite a nice, it tends to go quite well with the sand tan colour that we're going to paint the vehicle in eventually. And also, of course, what we're going to do is make sure the entire coverage, so I haven't got any bare plastic. The other reason, of course, we've got lots of photo etch on this vehicle, especially all these little things that we had to spend many hours on. Now we swap over to black primer. Why am I using black primer? Well, two purposes. One, I need to prime it, and secondly, we can use it as the base coat for the rubber portions of the vehicle. So in particular, the road wheel rubber section and these rubberized mud flaps. Quite a distinctive feature when you have a look at references of the real vehicle. And here you can see the references. What happens is the actual paint flakes off of these parts. They can see really clearly what goes on there. So we're going to do a bit of hairspray technique using nothing better than hairspray, of course, because it's all I've got. Spraying onto those parts, and we'll put them to one side. Now the US CARC Tan colour, I make up my own blend using Tamiya's. Use whatever you feel is best. And we are using the airbrush once again to cover the entire vehicle. I'm not using the base priming as any form of pre-shading. In fact, I want 100% coverage of this vehicle. I'll explain why later, a lot to do with the references, but it's up to you how you want to do it. If you want, pre-shading, strong contrast, go for it. In my case, no, I just like to sort of try and follow pictures, which I find a lot easy. And there is a supplied photo etch mask for the road wheels. This is why we left off the tracks and bits and pieces. You wouldn't be able to use this mask if you attached all the road wheels and the tracks in position. Works perfectly well, makes things easy. Okay, so let's go on, and with this hairspray technique, it's good idea just to give a light coating because you're going to degrade this paint finish, and work rather quickly after you've applied the paint. So warm water, and this brush here, it's not that soft, it's sort of like a bristly brush. What can I describe it as? Anyways, you can sort of see that it's not a soft brush flowing into the position, but it works really well to create these faded effects of where the paint separates off of the rubber portion of these mud flaps. And simple as that, real easy. Did notice one of the lights, big sink mark in it. Didn't spot that during the construction. A blob of super glue to fill that up, that gets tied up later. Let's have a look at a reference image here. Have a look at, these are called the combat identification panels. You will see that they are a different brown, tan, sandy colour to the rest of the vehicle. And I found this Tamiya straight out of the bottle. This was a great sort of match for that. So here's my easy method of painting tracks using 2 acrylic brown paints in order to do the metallic portions of the tracks. What I do is I spray the tracks with a mixture of water and detergent soap. That's going to make the mixture flow quite easily into all these gaps. As you can see, I'm so lazy, I'm not even using a paintbrush here. I'm using a piece of sponge because that's all that's really required. Here's the second lighter tone, like more rusty tone, I suppose. Also should point out I'm using flow aid. That again helps with this process. And I'm using like wet on wet just because you can. There's no real, there's not detail painting at this stage. And finally, just a dry, got a paper towel and rub the contact points of those rubber pads, sort of get the excess off. And we're going to use this very dark grey colour from a black paint set. Okay, work that out for yourselves, guys. And this is again mixed with flow aid. A little bit of retarder sometimes help if you've got to do this. And it's just a nice, simple process of painting all these pads. With painting acrylics as well, you've got to do all this work. Sometimes takes 2 coats, no biggie, really easy. And there you go, there's the finished result. And of course, let's not forget these big rubber flaps here are used to hold stowage onto the vehicle. And they are also rubber. Just a reference there. Very distinctive feature of the Bradley is this anti-laser coating. Now I found this holographic film and it's self-adhesive. It's fantastic. All I had to do was measure the width and depth of the periscopes and just simply stick them on, and they look fantastic. In fact, they are the best representation of these optics I've ever come across. So thoroughly recommend if you can get your hands on something like that in order to represent them realistically. Here's the commander's viewer, and I've got some more of this holographic film. I decided to do one blue, one red. Don't know if that's accurate, but there you go. You can even see through the mesh grid. You can see the holographic effect work really, really well. With all this base painting completed, we can mount up the road wheels. Again, check your alignments. And finally, just using a little bit of glue, drop them in place. How do we attach the tracks? Because we've got that little link cut out there, all I had to do was thread this in through the idler and then drop in the sprocket and push it into place. I'll be honest, I didn't use any glue. I was trial fitting and it worked so well, I just went with that. And also with these mud flaps, again, I was able to push these into position. They're locked in fine. There you go. Now it's a case of joining the side armour. Did a trial fit. Used a bit of thicker glue here. And pop them on. There you go. Real easy, real simple, accurate painting. Worked out really well. You can also see this solid base coat that I've used. And also decided, of course, here, like we can go towards assembly now of some parts because we're going to obviously commence the weathering and some detail painting. Decided to drop on these CIP panels as well. These ones at the rear have location points. These ones do not. So they were joined on by super glue. Markings. No markings included for a US vehicle inside the kit. So I found what I wanted to depict. And you can see these markings are not, there's some that are really accurate stencils and some that are not. So what I did, I took my reference image, used Photoshop here and duplicated the markings using Photoshop. Really simple procedure. Join me on Patreon if you don't know how to do it. It's real easy stuff. There you go. Print it out onto some paper, and now it's just a simple case of cutting out what will be masks for the markings. That is obviously that symbol there is obviously a vehicle identification number. Now you can see a little problem here. These masks are very proud of the vehicle, so when you do that, you're going to get quite a lot of overspray on the sand. So this sort of leads to a bit of back and forth, but it's nothing we can't really solve. Okay, for the rest of the markings, I found spares, used a bit of license here as well, and wanted to give some interest in the vehicle. And what I had to do was sort of spray back in the sand, the dark grey, the black on top of the sand. The overspray is just too much, and of course when I sprayed the sand on, it oversprayed the black, but we'll come back to that. Okay, vehicle tools, I hand painted them. I couldn't find any references of the Pioneer tools and Bradleys, but we're modelers, so we like to sort of weathering. Okay, is there any chipping on these vehicles? Yes, but where? That's what you should check for. The rear cargo ramp, or the entrance ramp, and the door does have, in some cases, quite unique, quite deep sort of chipping down to the metal. But the rest of the vehicle, we'll talk about it later. I'll tell you my opinions on it. So painting up the vehicle tools here, enjoyable process, of course. And also painting in the vehicle lights. As you can see, I didn't mask them. It's no real need, actually. You can serve quite a good view of those holographic stickers again. Orange for the front, red for the backs. Also, I left off the lights at this stage. Just made it easier to paint those details. Super glue them in place. There you go. And this is really what maybe I should have done in the first place, but I'm not very good at hand painting or freehand hand painting, so went back, diluted acrylic paints, repainted the markings. Okay, here we go, weathering, and I'm using a local product. Just wanted to give it a go. It's the same as everybody else's. It's an enamel wash. The thing, I think I've mentioned this before, be careful with these washes. They are thick out of the bottle. So what I tend to do is add some thinner and test it. We're going to be overpainting the vehicle. People call this a filter. We're going to be overpainting the vehicle. I've gone for grey here. I think it works really, really well on these sand-coloured vehicles. Actually, on any coloured vehicles. There you can see I've had to dilute it. I think quite a strong ratio. I think it was about 75-25. And a lot of people get confused about this one. As you can see, the application is all over. Not detail washing, but we're overpainting the vehicle with this with this paint. That's all it is. And from here, you would think, hey, he's not doing anything. I can't see anything. Well, that's the way it would appear to your eyes, but you're actually laying a film of paint on top. It was really clear when I painted that white paper that there was grey paint on top of it, and that's exactly what's happening when we're doing this process. Helps to blend as well with another. Well, I use a fan brush. You can use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. And now we're going to go on to what is detail pin washing. Again, using enamels and enamel thinner, making up my wash once again. Of course, a much smaller brush here. And I found this umber colour. I just thought it was quite nice. I didn't want to use strong contrasts on this vehicle. I just wanted to accent these details, give the impression of dirt, etc. And of course, it gets applied into all these detailed areas, all these folds. It takes a while, but it's quite relaxing. It's one of my favourite sort of parts of weathering, to be honest. Also, you can apply it because it's a paint. This is a paint again. I like to use this to overpaint the Pioneer tools and create like extra grime effects on them, as it were, overall. And I did this, I think I did this in one sitting. One thing that you should be aware of is cleaning up. If you've got the wash a little bit too concentrated, don't be worried to go with an enamel brush and tidy stuff up, and that's really what's going on there. Got a little bit of stowage that also got overpainted with this wash here. And we're going to use this wash once again, different mix. What we're going to do here is start adding effects to the lower portion of the vehicle, in this case the tracks and road wheels. In the first stage we only applied a rust type tones, but now it's, well, my procedure to add dirt wear effects to the lower portion of the vehicle. And now I'm going to create a tide. I'm simulating using Hairspray. I did do this, but I'm going to show you how to do a tide mark weathering effect. This is a piece of paper, simply roughly torn. And what I'm doing is airbrushing on a enamel mixture on top of the Hairspray. I'm first of all using a light sandy earthy colour. And why am I using that mask? That mask is to create this tide mark effect. Have a look at your own vehicles. This is really what happens. Second application is a darker brown. So because of course dirt's made of many different colours, so it's like a double tide mark effect. And now we go in, same fan brush that I used for the blending process. You can see I'm kind of skimpy with my equipment. Anyways, dampen it out and then start very, very lightly working. You're going to activate the Hairspray quite quickly. You can sort of see, there you go, it's starting to work. You do not want to keep overworking this. You want this really, really subtle. What am I doing? I am trying to create the effect where the dirt gets knocked off the vehicle, and also using a toothpick over the damp surface, you can sort of simulate as if the vehicle has come in contact with sort of small branches, bits and pieces like that. Finally, went into dust in the road wheels because I think they need a little bit more. At this stage, the final details are getting added. That is the standby sight for the vehicle. Just didn't want to knock it off. And of course, some vehicle aerials look pretty good on this as well. Join on the turret, and here I'm sort of like trial fixing the stowage. Didn't go big on the stowage. This is a spinal recovery board, and I decided to weather up a spare recovery straight bar in a green colour. Always nice to add something contrasting in terms of stowage. Gives it maybe a little bit more of a realistic appearance. Just apply the wash there, add a grime, and gets attached in place. Weathering, here we go. These Bradleys are in excellent condition, but I did notice very, very tiny, I am talking about the smallest amount of chipping on some of these armour panels because they're on the extreme exposed edges. So instead of going all in and chipping the thing to pieces, which they don't look like, what I opted for was a tiny amount of effects. And also I noticed that the bolts as well, they didn't seem to appear rusty. They possibly zinc coated, I don't know, but they had a more metallic effect to them. These loops here, these boarding loops as well, they also didn't appear rusty. They more had a metallic type effect to them. So using graphite pencil to impart that, and of course we can use that metallic glint. And there we go, a couple of crew figures and we're done. See you guys soon.